in our community. So she is a pediatric psychiatrist who works at Benefis Behavioral Health. She's a graduate of Drexel University in Philadelphia, where she earned her MD degree, and she did her fellowship at New Haven Yale Hospital in New Haven, Connecticut. She focuses on children and adolescents and guides young people through vulnerable situations. Her knowledge and experience are enhanced by her natural ability to build trusting relationships, essential in paving the road to wellness. So without any further ado, we welcome Dr. Latoya Floyd this evening.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I think this is very much so a timely topic right now. So I am a pediatric psychiatrist, but before you become a pediatric doctor, you go through adult, right? That's the pathway. So I'm going to flip-flop between children and adults because children don't live in an environment on their own. They live with their caregivers, they live in their families, they live in receiving homes. They live in an ecosystem. And so we're going to honor the ecosystem of the family. And so we're really going to talk about the interplay between stress and the environment. So I'm not technologically savvy, so I may break something, and I'm going to keep going, even if I do. There we are. This is how I feel, not just now, but sometimes a lot. And so being a psychiatrist, I don't know if people can see this slide. So there's a guy or a gal, not really sure. I'm not sure how she self-identifies, but there's a spike going through her head. And the phrase is, things are going to be all right. Things are going to be all right. And sometimes I feel like that. I feel like we kind of hide our feelings, right? What we're going to talk about, though, is the idea of stress being a stimulus-based definition of stress and model and a response-based definition of stress. Because I think it's important when we look at this picture, we see stress coming inside of us. Sometimes stress is inside of us coming out. And I think that's something I want to highlight, okay? I think stress is this really delicate dance between the environment and ourselves. "1982, it's Queen. They knew what we were facing, right? Pressure." I have the lyrics. Think about what's going on with the pandemic, right? So when we talk about a stimulus-based model, we want to think about Queen. The greater the pressure, the more likely the recipient, whether it's a person or a load-bearing beam, right? When the external stimulus, when the external pressure becomes too much, internal collapse is pretty much inevitable, right? The person in the picture that we saw before and the next few slides after that are not going to be pretty for that person, right? The problem with this definition, only thinking of it as stimulus-based, is it only focuses on external, and it doesn't encapsulate cumulative stress. So before that picture of the person with the knife in their hand, there could have been some other aggressive things going on, and we don't have an ability to account for that. Another way to kind of think about it is the straw that broke the camel's back. So this is what the courtroom would look like. It is the camel v. straw, right? That's what happens. So that's the stimulus bottle, i.e. I'm a tire, I run over a nail, and I just deflate. What we want to talk about is that there is a response definition, the idea that something happens, an alarm is sounded. Okay, an alarm is sounded and it alerts basically a response. And so the resistance response is somebody trying to cope with it, right? That's what we're talking about. And we're going to go more into detail with this because what this happens, this is more about the biological process that's occurring in our body when stress is occurring. Basically, the autonomic nervous system is triggered, right? And the duration of the resistance is the person trying to cope. But eventually, you will end up in the exhaustion phase. So what we're talking about here is you come outside, and this has happened to me here, and there's a snake. Now, I was introduced, and I'm not from here, so I have never seen a snake outside in the wild. I've seen pictures. So I didn't know what to do exactly, so I slammed the door. Now I'm in the resistance phase. I get the hose, right? Because all animals hate the hose. Guess what? Snakes don't hate hoses. That didn't work for me. And then I got my husband, who's also, East Coast strong. He got the leaf blower because every animal hates a leaf blower. Snakes don't hate leaf blowers, actually. So we're trying to resist, and eventually we get exhausted, and we call people, and people from here have very good suggestions about how to deal with snakes, and we dealt with it. But again, we were exhausted by the end of this. So what am I trying to sell you? I'm trying to sell you that this is a dynamic process, right? And it's reflecting both internal and external factors. The queen model of this is, again, I'm a tire, I run over a nail, and now I'm flat. The other model actually suggests that, you know what, I'm a tire, I ran over a nail, but guess what? I'm one of those fancy run flats. I am not flat. I actually can go on because I am designed to go on even if there's a nail in me. I can get you 60 miles to the gas station because I'm a fancy tire. This model actually looks at the idea that there's things inside of me, things that are innate in me, things that are part of my DNA and who I am, my beliefs, my culture, my religion that are going to guide and carry me through the stress response. So I really like this idea. So I finally found a definition that works because I hate when you go to a presentation, everybody's like, well, stress, actually I have to tell you about the first slide. So the guy with the thing coming out of his head, do you know what my husband asked? Which one do you think you are? Isn't that crazy? Which one do you think you are? Do I cause stress? Are you saying I'm the one driving the spike in that man's head? And he's like, you're a shrink. We don't do that. Not anymore. We don't do that. But the idea is everybody thinks about the stress that's coming at us. But what about the stress that we're spewing out into the world, right? So I like this particular definition, right? Stress is a relationship between the person and the environment. And it's appraised by me, the person, as either taxing or exceeding my resources and endangering my well-being. So what am I saying? So it's been a dumpster fire of a year for me. Let's just be honest. I don't know who else is thriving here in 2020, but it's been a wee bit of a dumpster fire. But one of the things I'll say is I have certain groups of friends and I look at them and, they've had a lot of issues. There's been a lot of tragedy. And they keep going. One of my friends, her husband's a police officer, and it's very hard right now for many people. And his partner died of COVID. And she had to quarantine with her husband, and she's also a counselor. So it's not funny. I laugh because it's anxiety provoking. But she still organized a food drive on her birthday for people by Zoom or Facebook. She did it. And then I have some friends that it's just like my gym is closed. It's just super hard. And I know it's hard for both of them, but my bias is toward my friend that's like, oh yeah, he's had a really big tragedy. But it's the idea that Allie is appraising how she feels. And she's deciding whether she's taxed or not, right? Because some people bite their tongue and they can't go to work, right? It's a fact, but it's okay. So the question is stress in America increasing? So we're going to get to the pandemic. These numbers are pre-COVID. I'm going to provide you with what I think numbers are going to be after COVID, but these are just my numbers that I've made up, right? I could be completely wrong. So most Americans are suffering from moderate to high stress. 44% are reporting that their stress has increased over the past 5 years, again, pre-COVID. What are the concerns? Money, 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 money. Work and the economy. Also fears about job stability. That's actually up, right? But kids are fine, right? Kids are fine, right? A third of kids reported, and then this is pre-COVID, that they were having headaches and stomach aches and difficulty falling asleep. So this is where I flop back and forth between focusing on kids and focusing on adults. So parents don't realize their own stress is affecting their kids. 69% of parents say their stress only has a slight to no impact. Teeny weeny, itty bitty little bit, right? But 14% of kids say, my parents' stress doesn't bother me. Only 14%. What about the other 86? They're stressed. The other thing is kids should work for the NSA, right? I love kids because they're ear hustlers. They hear everything that's going on in their house. They know their nan has cancer. They heard you whispering to Aunt Charlene about it on the phone when you thought they were playing their Xbox. They know everything. They know dad's worried about losing his job. You thought he was playing the Nintendo Switch. You were spelling things, and guess what? They can spell that word, and they know what it is. So some of them are very much in tune to what's going on in their house. But I guess what I want to know is, what do you guys think? So I have to let you know, if I wasn't a doctor, let's just take a moment and step away from stress, I would do something completely frivolous. I tell myself this. I would be a game show host. I love The Price is Right. I love Deal or No Deal. I love Wheel of Fortune. And you know what I really love? I love The Family Feud. Okay. So, top 10 answers are on the board. Who knows what's stressing kids out? Any ideas? Social media. I hate the internet. What else? School. How about those bullies? Right? How about issues in their families? Any other ideas? I would love to give a Ford Focus away like Steve Harvey does at this moment for that answer. Let's talk about it. That's a little bigger than I thought it would be. And yes, I missed a number. I just saw that when I went through it here. So I do talk about it, but I missed it on the screen. So faster development. What do I mean by this? Kids are growing up faster, right? So you know how they say like 50 is the new 30? Did you know kindergarten is the new first grade? That's what I was told. So 30 years ago, kindergarten was for finger planing and blocks, and today kindergartners are spending 25 minutes on homework, while first and second graders have 3 times that, okay? This data is from the National Education Association, okay? This is where I'm getting at. Another report from University of Virginia found that time spent on literacy in kindergarten has gone up 25%. I'm not against kids reading, but it's gone up 25% since 1998, while time spent on art and music and physical education has dramatically dropped, right? Yeah, I want kids to read, but I need recess and I need pro-social outlets. I need to kind of get that in there early, right? Because if you don't figure out how to play and don't figure out how to let things go, it's really hard to teach that to adults, right? Once you've kind of gotten out of that play. It's hard to teach adults to play. Sometimes I can. So the other thing is, remember recess? Your kids may not. This was a surprising statistic to me. Some of you may already know it. That 7% of first graders and 8% of third graders have never had recess. Isn't that crazy? This is also from the same educational reference. Sorry, I have asthma. I don't want people to think they can get a virus through the screen. It's asthma. Since 2008, 20% of school systems have shortened recess by an average of 50 minutes a week. That's a lot, right? Physical education also has been slashed, and most kids have PE twice a week or less. This is going to come up later when we talk about resilience, right? This is going to come up later. So somebody astutely shouted out, and I must have taken it off because it's like my most hated one. I suppressed it. Social media and the internet, right? The biggest issue is kids are exposed at a much younger age to really terrifying stuff, right? Just really terrifying stuff. And they see, we're not just talking about violence and sexuality, but just, just a lot of things that I wish that they did not view as entertainment. I like John Wick. I don't think my nephew should be watching it. I don't think he should, but he has it on Blu-ray. Unfortunately, the parents also don't know what the kids are watching, right? They have their own tablets, they have their own smartphones, and it's really hard to regulate. In my office, I often tell people, if you're thinking about giving your kid an electronic device, you really need to think about how you're going to monitor it and what are the rules. It's no different than letting a kid take your SUV out. You wouldn't just throw the keys at him and go, hey, bro, have at it, bring it back with some gas. No, you would be like, this is where you're going, this is who you're meeting, this is when you're going to be back, and if there's a problem, I should be able to reach you. It's a really, the internet is a really powerful thing, and everybody knows what clickbait is. It's like I click on something and then the screen pops up and takes me somewhere else, and then I have all these screens, and It's just, it's very overstimulating, right? So speaking of overstimulating, let's talk about overstuffed schedules. I find this really hard in my office when parents are like, bedtime's this time, because we go to cello, and then and then after cello we have wrestling, and then we get home, and then we have dinner, and so the kid can't really, there isn't a lot of wind down, you know what I mean? And I was also an overscheduled child, and the idea of where this comes from, right, are the tiger moms that tell us, rightfully so, that you have to experience all these things. But sometimes kids are miserable because of all these experiences. God knows I hated my flute, but my parents made me play it. I wanted to play something else. They said no, and I carried that flute around until somehow it disappeared. So, bullying and teasing, right? Before the internet, if you weren't invited to a birthday party, you just heard about it. Oh, Kim had a birthday party, and you're like, oh, okay. But now, thanks to social media, you see it on Instagram, you see the clown, you see the ponies, you see them making faces. You know, you really missed it. The other part of the internet is if you're a kiddo and you're at a spelling bee and you make a really egregious error, everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a camera, and your egregious error has now gone viral, right? It's gone viral. You know, usually it's just somebody sending you a nasty note, nobody likes you. But now, one click away, right? I can't move schools because it's on the internet. It doesn't matter if my parents changed my school, people still know. Social pressures, lure of social media, not enough sleep. A third of parents say homework and after school activities gets in the way of their kids' ability to sleep. And nearly 3 out of 4 kids aged 6 to 17 have an electronic device in their room. And that's, guess what, cutting in their sleep. It's on, people. The other thing we don't think about is chronic disease. There's been an increase in chronic disease, and we're not talking about just behavioral problems. We're talking about asthma. We're talking about obesity. Kids are actually conscious of some of the health risks because they're also searching the internet and worried about their risk and their family. And finally, family disruption. I wanted to say a special part about this because, you know, when people hear family disruption, they automatically go to divorce, right? You know, my parents were together and apart and together apart. It went from 4th grade to med school. It's just horrible. And then they finally divorced. But it's the idea that the divorce rate's been pretty stable, right? The one thing I want to talk about is, especially with our population in Great Falls, is more than 2 million of American children have a parent that's like deployed, right? Iraq or Afghanistan. That's another thing to kind of think about and kind of bring it home to our community. And this causes a lot of stress, and that there's been some studies that show children from military families of all ages have a little bit more anxiety. And I'm bringing this up, and I think military families are very cohesive and their communities help each other on base, but just as a provider, something that I want to keep on my radar. And then lastly, parental stress, right? Parents that are, you know, stressed out and don't think their kids know. I'm just asking you as a parent to pay attention and pay attention to yourself. So I will tell you, because I don't want people to feel bad and they're like, oh, she's standing up there on stage talking about blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to talk about something super classy. Anybody know what that is? You chew all the stuff, you put it in a spit cup. I thought it was cool. So I had this packet of gum. It was called Big League Chew. Does anybody remember Big League Chew? It had a foil pouch. You'd chew it and had a baseball player on. You could get a wad in there. And I walked around with this like little cup and I pretend to like spit in it. Super ladylike, right? But it's the idea that we're watching. We're watching. I also had the candy cigarettes that blew smoke that my teacher confiscated. So it's just the idea that kids are watching what we do. And if we have maladaptive habits, they think it's cool. Like when I think about it now, how gross. Like your 6-year-old is pretending to dip stuff. Like how many notes did we get home from school, right? Okay, enough about snuff, unless people have questions about it. I like this little cartoon. Whoops. Sorry, not tech savvy. I like this cartoon because it talks about 8 ways that if you just want to think about ways it can show up, right? How kids can manifest anger. They can manifest it with anxiety, or anger can be a manifestation of anxiety. They can have difficulty sleeping. We're going to go into this more often, defiance. And people are like, oh, they're just bad. Well, I wonder if they're really anxious. I wonder if something's going on, right? Chandeliering is just, oh, the meltdown, right? Lack of focus because their minds are occupied with something else. Avoidance, we're going to get to that. Over planning, right? Over planning. I really like that. The kid that comes in and their backpack's perfect and all their assignments are perfect, and sometimes it's a level of control and it's a positively reinforcing thing. And if you have a perfectionist kid, you love that, right? But then when things kind of go, I didn't get a 98 and they got a 92, then things start to break. Things start to break down. Talked about this. We're going to go into this in detail. So we're going to start talking my language, okay? Excuse me. Separation anxiety. So when there's a certain level of impairment, and we're going to get to this, where your kids are having intense thoughts of safety, unable to go to school, frequent stomach aches, complaining, being overly clingy, they can't go to sleepovers, they're tantruming at the idea of separating from their parents, and they're having nightmares. I'm thinking separation anxiety. I'm putting this out here more for providers, more for teachers, just trying to give you a constellation of things that I'm looking for, because people often ask, like, what are you looking for? Well, these are some of the things I'm looking for. Specific phobias are just what they are. Phobias: arachnophobia, fear of spiders, fear of dogs, insects, fear of needles. What I'm looking for is you can't walk the dog anymore because there's a dog and you didn't get bit. You know, I'm looking for something else. Social anxiety, difficulty talking to people, terrified of making speeches in public, few friends outside the house. Now, this I didn't want to capture with a title because sometimes this can be trauma, worrying about things that, you know, before they happen, sense of foreshortened future, things aren't going to work out for me, constant worries about families. So I wanted to separate this out of separation anxiety because sometimes this can be trauma, because let's just be honest that some homes are not safe, right? And when a kid is saying, I'm worried about mom, it could actually be a realistic worry about mom, or I'm worried about grandma. There could be violence in the house. So I wanted to separate it out so you could hold space in your mind that the child could be communicating something different. Repetitive and unwanted thoughts, OCD, we're moving in that. Embarrassment of making a mistake. I'm trying to tease out perfectionism, kids that are like being perfect versus something pathologic. And of course, looking at lack of self-esteem and confidence, because now I'm thinking more depressive symptoms. So what I really want to stress is anxieties can become pretty severe, and they can interfere with your child's usual activities, you know, going to school, their academic potential, being the best people that they can be, right? And so when people hear child psychiatry, they think I'm going to pull a big medication gun out of my purse, tell your child to open wide, and I am going to fire off everything I have. No, 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 no. We're going to first talk about therapy. We're going to talk about counseling. We're going to talk about changing the external environment. We're actually going to talk a little bit about this at the end. And if needed, then maybe yes, medication. But I think sometimes there can be anxiety about going to see the doctor because all they're going to do is put you on meds, right? And that's not true. And if it is, go to another doctor. So no zebras. So in med school, they would say, like, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. So anxiety, it's not a zebra, right? 40 million Americans have an anxiety disorder, 7% of kids. And these symptoms actually are developing earlier and earlier. So what about adults? Kind of looks the same when we talk about physical symptoms: pounding of the heart, racing, shortness of breath, sweating, tremors, twitches, headaches, fatigue, insomnia, upset stomach, right? All these things. The emotional part with the adults is, it could stem from the adults, the sense of apprehension and just drudgery and dread, right? Feeling jumpy and restless, and catastrophizing, anticipating the worst and looking for it, right? I'm a catastrophizer. It's a cognitive distortion, and I enjoy being a catastrophizer. If I go to the nail salon and she clips my cuticle and I start to bleed, at the end of the visit, Hillary, have mercy in my mind. I'm a catastrophizer. I go all the way down, right? All the way, right? You know people that get that, you know, like you call somebody, your husband doesn't answer, and your friend's like, he's dead. And it's like, oh, really? Do you think he just didn't get the cell phone, or bad reception? No, he's dead. He's gone, right? Those are catastrophizers. Good people they are. All right. So why are adults stressed, right? We're going to go through it. So this guy said, who said work is stressful? I'm 35 and I look great, right? He's living the dream. All right, so causes of stress in adults. So this is a small print slide. I tried to make it bigger. It just doesn't read very well. If you trust me, I'll tell you that the dark blue at the top is 2007. The light blue is 2008. The dark green is 2009. And the light green is 2010. And it's going descending down, right? So money, work, the economy, family, right? Health, housing, job stability, health problems that affect families, so health problems that cause disability, right? And personal safety. So we're going to talk about the social readjustment rating scale. So in 1967, this scale was developed. Everybody's probably seen this before. It's a questionnaire, and each of these 43, I'm going to read them out because I know it's really small. Each of the 43 life events gets awarded a life change unit, right? But it's depending on how traumatic it was felt by a large sample of participants, right? So again, we talked about our definition of stress, right? That it's how I appraise it, how I find it taxing, how I find it either going to, harm my well-being. So we all have to realize that this is not going to be the same for everybody. But I thought I would go through these. Now there are 43. Now my other dream is being an auctioneer. So I may go really fast, but you can also Google this. You can actually go on their site and take this yourself. Now, just so people don't think I'm sedity, my score is over 300. No lie. Yeah, I know. Some people looked up like, oh my God, get her off stage. She needs help. No, it's true. But we're going to talk about resilience. So death of a spouse is number 1. Divorce is number 2. Separation is number 3. Detention is 4. Death of a close family member. Major personal illness. Marriage is 7. Being fired at work. Marital reconciliation is number 9. Retirement. Major change in health. Pregnancy. Sexual difficulties. Gaining a new family member. Birth, adoption. Older adult moving in. Major business readjustment, major change in financial situation, whether you're better off or worse off, it's just a change. Death of a close friend, change in the line of work, change in the number of arguments with your spouse. Taking on a mortgage or closing on a mortgage, I really feel like that order should be changed. Major changes in responsibility at work, son or daughter leaving home, trouble with the in-laws, outstanding personal achievement, that sucks, right? Spouses beginning or ceasing work outside the home. Beginning or ceasing formal education, major change in life condition, new home remodeling, deterioration of the neighborhood, vision of personal habits, i.e. stop smoking during the pandemic, trouble with the boss, major changes in working hours, change in residence, change in school, change in the amount of recreation, also related, change in church activity, church is on Zoom now, major changes in social activity, taking on a loan, change in sleeping habits, change in the number of family get-togethers, change in eating habits, vacation, major holidays, and my favorite, traffic tickets, right? So basically, the idea is if you go on this little site, it's, if you Google the social readjustment rating scale, 150 points or less means little life change. And that means you have a low susceptibility to stress health problems. So congratulations, all you people that are 150 or less, super jealous. 150 to 300, you have a 50% chance of a major stress-induced health problem in the next 2 years. Hello, ticking time bombs. And my group, Go Home, Jersey Strong, it raises the odds about 80% that you will have some type of predictive change in your health due to stress over the next 2 years. So it's good I'm here today. The rest of it. So, again, sorry for the grunting. I get this question a lot. It's just in our head, right? Right? It's just in our head. So I'm just going to be honest. If something's in my brain, that is the absolute scariest and worst place it could be, because I've told you I'm a catastrophizer. It could be tiny, and by the end, we've gone nuclear, right? So it's actually just not in our head, though. Stress is in our body. Anxiety is in our body, right? This is a small, this is intended to kind of just remind me to kind of get you to understand all the organ systems that are reflected and touched by stress, right? So we get this sense of danger. So I open the front door and there's a snake, right? There's a signal that's going to my adrenal glands, which is actually going to start producing a lot of hormones, because at this point, I need to fight, which I'm not going to do. I am going to freeze, or I'm going to run, right? That's what I did. So it's going to increase your heart rate, all these hormones, increase your breathing. It's going to make glucose get to your muscles so you have the energy to get the hell out of there, right? It's going to make you sweat. It's going to inhibit insulin production, but it's going to raise your blood pressure. And if this system keeps going unchecked, if stress keeps happening, this is increasing your risk of hypertension. This is increasing your risk of stroke, heart attacks, headaches, anxiety, weight gain, you name it. It's touching every bit of this system. And so that's really why we really want to mitigate this stress response, right? Going on too high for too long, we're talking about sleep problems, weight gain, again, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, mental cloudiness, and unfortunately a weakened immune system, which is really important right now, right? So what I want to do is, so these are my numbers, and so I don't want people to write them down. I just want people to reflect on them. This is what I think the numbers are going to look like, because I showed you the graph with all the colors. This is my projection after COVID. That. Just going to blow up the computer. It's just going to be bad. It's going to be a lot of anxiety, a lot of things people are going to be worried about. So we are going to spend a moment talking about the pandemic, right? We talked about it a little bit. Children need a sense of structure, right? I can't really highlight this more than anything. Kids going back to school, it's helped them a lot, seeing their friends, but I think it's the structure and the routine they find comfort with. And we don't know what's going to happen, but even at the beginning of the pandemic, like telling parents to kind of keep the structure, get your kids out of their jammies. You know, if they're Zooming with the teachers, put them in clothes, let them have breakfast, and you also do the same, right? And it's really teaching the parents the importance of structure and consistency, right? College students, I think, are really, I don't see a lot of college students, but there's a lot of anxiety, I think, fueled by a lot of uncertainty. This is a time where you're leaving your family and you're going out into the world, and this is your time, man. The world is open to you, and now it's closed for a little bit, right? And things are online, and I think there's a lot of loneliness and just uncertainty with college students right now. Working age adults. Working age adults. We all know that the pandemic has closed a lot of businesses and different things. And so the problem is when adults have lost their job and they're kind of in this sense, as Americans, I think we have a lot of sense of worth and value in our job and being productive. I think that's a core identity of being an American, right? Producing. And so when we are out of work, I do think it eats at our sense of competency. I think that there's a concrete aspect of it, because I don't want people to think she's all frou-frou and woo-woo. It's the idea that, yeah, you need to be able to pay for your essentials, your rent, and your food, but it's also this existential crisis of, who am I if I'm not providing for my family? What am I really doing? And I think that can lead to a lot of depression, because people, again, have a lot of worth and value in what they do. And they're the people that have been the long haulers during this, the UPS drivers, the grocery store, all the essential workers, the healthcare workers, the nurses, all these people that have been holding it down, that it's exhausting. People that have kept going through the pandemic. So I feel like it's touched everybody. The next one, excuse me, the next one's a little controversial. I think older adults just need connection all the time, regardless of a pandemic. And so, I don't know. I talk to again, this is my presentation, so I talk to people I know, right? I think older adults in my world are handling it a little bit better. They've lost, some of them, and I'll speak for my family, have lost their husbands and they're living alone. And so they're already a little bit isolated and already a little bit, separated. And so for us, Zoom and FaceTime and these other opportunities have caused us to reach out more, to include them more. So in my world, and I can only speak, is that there's less isolation because we weren't doing a good job before the pandemic. That's just the truth in my world. And I don't know, maybe it's true for other people too. So we're going to move on. I got to do better at keeping the slides in sync. I'm sorry. We're going to talk about childhood trauma. Does anybody know what this is? Yeah, you know. What is it? Stranger Things? You watch it? No. Mm. I thought you were nodding your head because you were a fan. I watched this show. It's called Stranger Things. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Um, so sorry. So these three boys have lost their friend Will, right? And they're trying to understand this trauma of the loss of their friends, and they're using their own language. They're using Dungeons and Dragons, right? So boys, right? Um, Will's the little boy that's now come back from being missing. The place he's being is like home, but it's dark, it's empty, and it's cold. And the boys start to wonder if he's in an alternative universe that they call the Upside Down. And Dustin is reading from the book The Veil of Shadows, and they're describing the Upside Down as a place of decay and death. It's right next to you, and you don't see it. This is how I feel about childhood trauma. I feel like it's right next to us. It's under our nose. And we get a feeling of it. It feels cold. It's not quite right. Somebody comes in, something's not quite right. The kid's not quite right. We don't know what it is until we do know what it is. But we don't often see it initially, right? So we're going to talk about trauma. I can't do anything about telling you it without a definition, right? So trauma is a negative event, right? It's emotionally painful and it overwhelms your ability to cope. And we talked about this is all personal. It's your ability to cope, right? Not everyone that has a trauma develops PTSD. That's important. So why is this important? There is a relationship between child abuse and household dysfunction and the leading cause of deaths of adults in America. We're going to go to the ACEs study. Do people know the ACEs study? Yes, yes. No? Okay, cool. You won't be bored. Cool. So this was a study in California using their large HMO system between 1995 and 1997. This was the original study. We replicated it in Philly and added some additional questions. But basically, they basically collected the survey from about 17,000 participant about their childhood experiences and their current health and behavior. So I'm going to read the questions because I know it's really small, and that's going to be the next slide. And I think it's important to kind of hear. So this is a modified ACEs. This wasn't the original one. This one, I like this one because in the original ACEs study, they asked about domestic violence, but they only asked it in reference to the mom. They didn't ask about it in a larger way, and this questionnaire does. So I'm going to use this one. The questions are similar, okay? So we're going to start with question 1. Did a parent or adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? Act in a way that made you feel afraid or made you feel that you'd be physically hurt? If so, give yourself a 1 point. Did a parent or adult in the household often grab, slap, or throw something at you? Ever hit you so hard they left a mark? If so, score yourself a 1. Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you in a sexual way? Attempt to have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? If so, score yourself a 1. Did you often feel nobody in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Your family didn't look out for each other, didn't feel close or support each other? If those are true, give yourself a 1. Did you often not have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Were your parents too high or drunk to take care of you, to take you to the doctor if needed? If so, add a score of 1. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? If so, score yourself a 1. Were any of the adults or caregivers often pushed, grabbed, slapped? This is the question that was changed. Thrown at or had things thrown at them? Or sometimes bitten, kicked, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? If so, score yourself a 1. Did you live with somebody with a drinking problem or an alcohol problem or use street drugs? If so, score yourself a 1. Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? If so, score yourself a 1. Did a household member go to prison? If so, score yourself a 1. So don't panic if your ACE score is 5 or more, right? You're in good company. It's a metric. It's something that you should be aware of. You should be aware of it because the more early adverse childhood events, there's an increased risk of early death. And we're going to go through a few slides. I know I'm not very good on time, probably. I'm going a little okay. Okay. So childhood emotional and physical neglect presents a less favorable course of depression. The effect of childhood neglect on the course of depression was independent of socioeconomic determinants and clinical variables. So when you look at this slide, what you're looking at are men and women at the bottom and their ACE score and the score of depression and how it looks. So the more of the ACE score, you see an increased risk of the depression rates. This slide is showing ACEs versus alcoholism. Results suggest that children with particular adverse childhood events may initiate drinking earlier than their peers, and that they may be more likely to drink to cope with these problems. This is important if you're a pediatrician, a primary caregiver. This is a thing to talk to the kids about. Again, this is a metric. This is like your weight. This is your BMI. This is not shame. This is science. This is where we're going. ACE score versus domestic violence. Male and female partners, there is a positive association with the higher the score in perpetrating domestic violence. Now we're rounding back to my neck of the woods. Depression. People with an ACE score of 5 or more, 3-fold increase in the rate of prescriptions in general. This is pharmacology overreaching. I'm a doctor. True, Google it. I'm there. But this is pharmacology overreaching. Did you hear the questions I read? We have to talk to people about what's going on, because if I give you an antidepressant, I give you Lexapro, and you don't feel better, you just don't feel better, and you think you failed, and you might think you're treatment resistant. It's really something. It's real. It's real. Prozac's not going to make this okay. It's going to help, but there needs to be good therapy. There needs to be an understanding. ACE score versus, sorry, liver disease. Big one. Huge for me, right? Teen pregnancy, intercourse by 15. These are why we talk about these things. These are real issues that are going to create what I'm going to call a secondary trauma. Not that they can't take care of children later on, but that it's going to change the trajectory of things for some of them. This is also a very hard side. Individuals who reported experiencing a child sexual assault were 3 times more likely to be the victim of sexual violence in adulthood, making it the single largest risk factor among the 10 ACE types tested. I'm gonna skip that slide. I don't really like that slide. Should have taken it out. Anybody know who this is? It's Charlize Theron, right? Does anybody know what happened to Charlize Theron growing up? She had some early adverse childhood events. She had a lot, actually. So Charlize Theron is in Atomic Blonde, and if you haven't seen it, you need to see the movie. I'm just going to promote that right now because it's a great movie, and I think she could be Bond. I think she's amazing. So Charlize Theron, another part of her childhood was dad had a severe alcohol problem. There's also intimate partner violence. He came home drunk one day, and her mother and they locked themselves in the bedroom, and he began firing through the door at them. Mother retrieved her handgun and fired back, killing him. So I show Charlize because she's beautiful and she's successful and she's a mother, and I just think she's super dope. But it didn't start out perfect. But you have to know what you're working with in yourself in order to get your life to look what you want it to look like. Okay. Excuse me. I know, it so sucks. I'm sorry. So we talked about what stress is. We've talked about when stress becomes anxiety. We've talked about anxiety disorders in children. We've talked about what it looks like in adults. We talked about what stress in adults looks like. So now it's just like, how do we help people? No mud, no lotus. Anybody heard this? No? Okay, cool. Well, at least it's not boring. People are hearing stuff they haven't heard before. Or maybe they're just asleep on the Zoom, I don't know. So Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk and a peace activist. And he acknowledges that suffering is really bad, but he also says that we try to run away from suffering. We try to cover it up. We try to consume it. We try to eat through it, smoke through it, inject through it. But unless we're able to face suffering, we can't be present and available to life. And happiness is forever going to elude us. That's what he says. And so the idea is this beautiful lotus flower often comes out of really gross, sticky mud. So no mud, no lotus, right? So if some of these things, if you're hearing some of these things and some of these like apply to you, think of Charlize. And if that doesn't work, think of the lotus, okay? But there's going to be people out here that's like, this is bullshit, right? There's going to be those people. And this is the only thing I can offer you. This is the only thing that I have, right? Print this out, put it on a firm surface, right? Follow the directions in the circle and repeat till you're unconscious, because that is the only way you're going to avoid stress during this pandemic, okay? All right. Don't do that. Don't. It was a joke. I don't want to hear this later. Somebody did this. Dr. Floyd said to bang your head against the wall. Okay, resilience. You know I love a definition. We've already covered, I compulsively come up with definitions. My sister's like, how's it going? I don't know. So resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. Threats are significant sources of stress, family relationships, right? I think that definition is wordy, and that for me to say something's wordy, it must be wordy. I like this. For me, resilience has been able to keep my shape. When I'm between a rock and a hard place, I just find just enough room for the next breath to go on. It's not that I'm doing it well either, right? I'm not rocking it hard, okay? But I'm getting to the next step and I'm moving forward. I'm gonna take a 1-minute water break so I can like not sound like this. My PFTs were good this morning. I went and got them checked. How do you build resilience? We're going to talk about this. So people are like, well, why aren't you talking about self-care? She talked about stress, but she didn't talk about self-care. Everybody knows what self-care is, right? Everybody knows you should eat well, you should exercise, you should not smoke, you should limit your caffeine, you should limit your alcohol, you should have a positive spiritual relationship. Resilience is a little bit different, I think, than just telling people to do self-care, right? I like the idea of how do you keep your bananas together when the monkey is chasing you down, right? So we're going to talk about it in a different way. So the idea is when pain or trauma comes, I like to isolate. I like to turtle. When I'm not feeling my A game, I hide. That's my internal, that's just something I've learned about myself over this year. But it's important to accept help from others and support from people who care about you. So shout out to my family, my friends, my behavioral health team, my nurse, and everybody that's been nice to me this year. This can be anything from whether you're going on a weekly date with your spouse, a lunch date with your friends. And I get it. People are like, is she really going to talk about a group right now? We're in COVID. You can't join a group. Yeah, you can. There are actually a lot of lovely online communities out there. And so we're going to talk about outlets. And, you know, not all of them are great, but some of them are. So one of the ones I want to talk about, there are a couple I want to talk about as far as outlets when we're talking about joining a group. Chris Carr is an activist. She's an author. Has anybody heard of Chris Carr? No. Okay, good. So Chris Carr has stage 4 cancer. Chris Carr has had stage 4 cancer, I think, for 16 years. I can't imagine having something, knowing I'm in the last stage and going on with my life. So I saw her documentary and I was completely inspired by her. And over the past year, she started a wellness committee or a wellness community. And so she talks about, you know, stress, and she talks about meditation, and she talks about hydration, and she talks about prayer, clean makeup, wherever you want to kind of join. Then she has this closed community where you pay like $20 a month, and she coaches you through different things when life is stressful to how to, you know, sear tofu. You know, she talks about everything. And the thing is, I don't really participate in the other side. I do belong to this community. I'm not selling it though. But on the other side, there's a lively Facebook part of it, and I don't really kind of I look, but people are like, oh, you know, my mom has cancer and I'm trying to move forward, and people are just sending well wishes. You can do it. Remember to stay structured in who you are. Narrow the focus of their ego. They're giving all this good feedback, and they're strangers, people from like New Zealand to China, like it's everybody in this little community, and it's actually really kind of lovely. The other thing I'm going to talk about is another outlet is Insight Timer. Everybody likes Calm and Headspace. I like Insight Timer. There are about 50,000 free meditations on Insight Timer. And there are also classes that you can pay for, like long-term classes, but it's a place where you go and the computer is keeping track of you. It's telling you how many consecutive days. So if you don't want to join a community, this is a way to have accountability and feel like because the iPhone is giving you the feedback. Your platform is giving you feedback. Oh, you meditated 5 days in a row. Good for you, right? So these are some of the outlets. Relationships include things that are other than people. So that's not a great picture, but that's my Duke. Mr. Duke and I have a thing going on. I scratch his belly and the love affair begins, right? So there's accountability in my relationship to my dog. And people are like, what is she talking about? When I come home, he wants my attention. When I come home, I put my phone down, my purse down, I wash my hands, and for 5 minutes, I'm just completely in it, and that's what we do every day. He looks forward to it, and I do too. Relationships are not always Homo sapien, let's say. Right? The other relationship I want people to think about, especially in the pandemic, is looking at this gentleman who's looking in the mirror. The relationship that we have with ourselves. Some of us are not very kind to ourselves. Some of us tell ourselves things that we would never, ever, ever tell another person. True stuff, right? When I think of the self, I think of who am I? And sometimes I think, how did I get here? I found a gray hair in March, and it was just, when was this gonna start? Like, I was like, a pandemic and a gray hair? Like, I don't know, Jesus, it's getting kind of tight, right? The question is, where do I go from here? How do I help myself? Am I participating in my own suffering in my life? That's a big one. If your life isn't moving, and this is for adults and kids, how am I participating in and allowing things to just go, right? During this pandemic, relationships are not only with other Homo sapiens. That's what I would argue. Foster wellness. So this is take care of your body, practice mindfulness, avoid negative outlets. We're going to talk about this. So Chris Carr talks about taking care of the body, right? She talks about how you're eating, she has 5 pillars of wellness: how you're eating, how you're drinking, how you're thinking, how you're resting, and how you're renewing. So the first email I got from her was like this hydration challenge. And so some people know that I have a thing on my phone and it sounds like water and it reminds me to drink. So it's actually not just about the water though. It's actually a mindfulness moment. Because there are times that I'm telling you I can't self-regulate, that I can't even remember to drink water. So when that little thing goes off, it's also an invitation for me to see where I am in my life and in my day, and do I need to go to the bathroom? Do I need something to eat? It's an invitation to think about myself, okay? Now, when people start thinking about exercise, right? Getting pumped with Arnold, doing the jazzercise, the Jane Fonda. If you hate Zumba, don't do it. I get so tired of people saying, I hate exercise. There has to be something you can do, whether it's a walk, jumping on the trampoline with your children. If it doesn't bring you an element of happiness, it's not for you. I'm pushing exercise not so you can fit into your skinny jeans or your leather pants for the winter. I'm arguing for exercise because it fights the cortisol. It fights that stress response, right? We're going to help our immune system. We're going to increase those endorphins. We're going to help with serotonin. That's why I'm pumping exercise, right? I don't care if you fit in your skinny jeans or not. I mean, it would be nice, but whatever. It's not a goal, right? When we talk about, for me, taking care of our bodies. Jon Kabat-Zinn, anybody heard of him? Excellent, okay. His last name is Z-I-N-N, and he's the founder of mindfulness, pretty mindfulness-based practice. So he says that mindfulness is an ongoing love affair with life itself, right? It's interesting because you hear mindfulness, people think you're sitting in a Buddhist temple and you're trying to be mindful and you're trying to have the absence of thought and you're fighting with your monkey brain. He basically says it's not that. It's just like, so he does this experiment, and it's going to sound a little pervy, but he's like, when you're in the shower, check and see if you're in the shower. So when I'm in the shower, sometimes I'm thinking about, oh my God, I have to do this presentation. I hope it doesn't suck. That's what I'm thinking about in the shower, right? But he says that when you're in the shower, ask yourself if you're in the shower. When you ask yourself if you're in the shower, you're back in your body and you're in the shower. It's really kind of groovy because we spend so much time in the future projecting and worrying, or in the past. He argues for being in the moment. And being in the moment is when somebody is sitting across from you and they're having coffee with you, put your phone in your purse. We all just put it down, right? Put it in your purse. Look at the person, right? Talk to them. Be in that moment. Feel the heat of the coffee. Smell it. That's mindfulness. The other thing is, like, that's great, but does it work in kids? Yeah. There's Peaceful Piggy. There's Zen Pigs. There are a lot of really groovy pigs out on the internet that will teach your kid to meditate. They're sitting like a frog. There are all these activities that get kids to go inward into their own mind to calm their own autonomic nervous system, and that's what we want, right? So the Journal of Social, Cognitive, and Affective Neuroscience showed that meditation training not only lowers anxiety levels in people, so I'll give you the geeky part, it also has an effect on the anterior cingulate cortex and the ventrotegmental prefrontal cortex brain regions, right? So this is a part of the worry brain, the thinking brain, right? That part of the brain, that's where we want to kind of target things, right? So that's where meditation works, and that's why we want to do it in mindfulness. There was a study in 2004 that found that children with ADHD and learning who learned meditation with their parents, not with the counselor, they learned meditation with their parents in a clinical setting, kept practicing at home, had better concentration at school. My favorite thing is, so when I was in Philly, I was in detention. Oh, I worked in detention for 5 years. Whoops. And so, so some of those kids were high risk. And so in California, they expanded the school day by half an hour in these high risk schools and to build meditation into the day. And the results were that they had better attendance, better grades, fewer suspensions, and generally happier and less aggressive kids. I did something similar with my girls in the community-based detention. We would do a meditation group, or we do a mindfulness group or a tea group, and they actually liked it. For me, I'm gonna do a special shout out for trauma. So I like trauma and yoga with trauma, getting kids back into their bodies, right? Pulling them back in. You can still do the breath work, but it's really easier if you get them moving first. So if you're a clinician listening, that's just been my experience. Okay. 5 signs you need a digital detox. Okay. You spend more time on the internet than you intended, right? You get on there, you just want to look at this one story, and you're trying to figure out if Khloe Kardashian's back with Tristan Thompson. You're trying to figure out what is hanging in Mary and Harry and Meghan's house. You're just all over it, right? The internet sometimes can't be helpful. There are mean people hiding behind keyboards, and people often don't feel good after they get on the internet. Some people are motivated by FOMO, fear of missing out. I hate FOMO. You're always going to miss something. If I'm on the internet, I'm missing something my dog is doing. So I'm always going to miss something. It's just you have to make a choice, right? So for some of us, the urge to check in is real. And checking work email all the time, it's a hard thing. There was a study that found that on average, it took 23 minutes to get back on task after a distraction. Potentially important email could mean that you've lost out on 23 minutes of meaningful work. My favorite are the fact that people are reporting phantom vibrations. People think their phone is ringing and it's not. Have you seen those people? I'm one of those people, and it's quite embarrassing. But I do have a story I should tell you. Well, okay, it doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you anyway. So I was in my office, and I had my work phone and my personal phone. I was meeting with a parent, and somehow I was listening to what the parent said, and I'm like, you can get that if you want. And she goes, it's your phone. And I'm like, oh, you can still get it if you want it. Don't let that stop you. There's never enough time in your day. When I find that people, when I talk to them about putting things in their schedule, people are like, I just don't have enough time. There's an app called Moment. Some of our smartphones, my smartphone tells me, you spent this many hours on the internet, and you've done this much. And my battery's like, you've surfed this much. But if you don't, there's an app called Moment. And one of the reviews said, I tracked it and it haunts me. This guy said he picked up his phone 40 times and spent 2 hours working on emails and checking media and text messages. So I think that that's an important thing to talk about when we talk about building time. So when I have parents come in and like, I just don't have time to do this. I just don't have time to do this. What I do is I do a 24-hour day, put all the hours, highlight where you're sleeping, highlight where you're eating, where you're working, where you're going to school, and then we try to figure out where this other nebulous amount of time has gone. And sometimes it's wasted on stuff like this. And then you can kind of go, do you want to cut that down, or do you think that's important? I mean, Candy Crush is awesome, but we have to put the phone down. Okay, we're moving back. We're still talking about building resilience. Finding purpose, helping others, being proactive, and looking for opportunities of self-discovery. Okay, Viktor Frankl. Yes, all right. Viktor Frankl is a psychiatrist, and his book was published first in 1946, and it describes his experience as a prisoner in Auschwitz during World War II, and his desire to find meaning through this experience. And basically, meaning is essential to the human experience. I couldn't decide. I like both of these quotes. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And then my favorite, those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow. So when I talk to parents that are obese and smoking and whatever it is, using substances, if the why is to get your children back, how you do it, if you really want it, the why is so important. The how becomes almost anything you can bear, right? The problem is the absence of a why, no purpose, can make unbearable almost anyhow, whatever I ask of you, right? The benefit of altruism for stress management. There was a study that found that dialysis patients, transplant patients, and family members who became support volunteers for other patients experienced increased personal growth and well-being. And another study were with people that had multiple sclerosis and showed that those that offered other MS patients peer support experienced greater benefit than their supported peers, including improvements on self-awareness, esteem, depression, and daily functioning. So altruism, this could be donating to a food pantry. If you know that your friend's also a struggling mom and you have enough to make another lasagna and give it to her. This can be small. Just looking beyond yourself a little bit, right? And this is if you can. This is if you sincerely can, right? This is not you trying to pull out of your own grief, right? By doing something nice for somebody else. This is if you have the ability and you are able to, right? Be proactive. Dumpster fires, right? This is a hard one. This is a personal one. If you see somebody dragging a dumpster to the front of your house, that should raise a flag. If you see them putting flammable things in said dumpster, you should go query that, what's happening in your life. Do not wait and come home till there's gasoline outside your house to start to look at a problem. Don't wait till there are matches. If things aren't working well in your life and you know things are moving toward an inevitable end of destruction, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice, right? You have to make a choice. Don't wait for the match. If you know that something in your healthcare, don't wait for the doctor to say, you know what, your BMI is really high. I'm worried about diabetes, Don't wait for your doctor to go, look, if you come back next time and it's not lower, I'm putting you on meds. Let's just try to be proactive in taking care of ourselves and managing our stress so that we don't have to have a huge event at the end. That's part of resilience, is reaching out, knowing when we need to intervene. Frida Kahlo, hey. No? Yes? Okay. I like Frida. Frida Kahlo is a Mexican artist, and she had a huge trauma. She was on a bus and holding the pole on the bus, like, you're going on the subway and you hold the metal. The metal pole went through her spine, and she survived. She survived. But she painted portraits of herself because she says, I'm the person I know best. I paint my reality. The only thing I know is that I paint because I need to. And I paint whatever passes through my head without consideration. Formally addressing your feelings is something that is going to build resilience. Understanding your strengths so that you can boost your self-esteem, considering your weaknesses and where you want to improve, assessing your circumstances and understanding what's working and what's not working. This is building resilience. This can happen during the pandemic because we are spending a lot of time alone. And I think the thing in America is, maybe other countries, is when people are like, oh, she's alone, that poor dear is alone. People think if you're alone, you're lonely. And people think if you're single, it's pathologic. What I can argue here is considering what relationships are really important for you and filtering out these filler relationships because you have nothing better to do. There was an interesting survey in Virginia that found 25% of women and 66% of men would choose electric shock rather than be alone with their thoughts, right? Like I said, being alone with your thoughts is a scary place to be. I showed you that already. We're winding down. If you're still there, you're super resilient. So another way to build resilience are embracing healthy thoughts, keeping things in perspective, accepting change, maintaining a hopeful outlook, and most importantly, learning from your past. We're getting close to Christmas, so I can put this slide up, right? Right? Smiling was his favorite, right? In a study of children, positive expectation about the future was significantly associated with lower rates of depression. Just a positive outlook. And we're not pretending bad stuff is not happening, but we're also saying we're resilient, we're going to build community, we're going to be together, and we're going to get through it, right? That's what we're saying. Accepting change. Oh, that sucks, right? Accepting change, give yourself grace. Give yourself time to adjust to the transition. Expect you're going to be stirred up by change, right? It's not going to feel good. You're going to cry. You're going to be moody, but letting you know it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. Not taking things personally and not obsessing over things. Trying to go with the flow and not be rigid, right? And the thing is, never worry alone, right? That's the best advice I've gotten, is never worry alone. And the other thing that we're going to get to is learning from the past. The past can hurt. You can run from it, or you can learn from it. You know, we want to avoid suffering. I think that's what is in our all DNA, but sometimes we have to look at patterns, right? I look at patterns of friendships with kids. I find kids that sometimes will, and adults too, will sometimes attempt to change their identity to infiltrate a friend group and then have to perpetuate this false sense of self. And not being known and not being understood is a horrible feeling. And then that drives depression, right? I see it in adults. I see it in friends. You know, and the thing with this and learning from the past is, I think as adults, we get so quick to start to clean up our mess and hide it, you know, that we don't really understand why it broke in the first place. We really don't understand it. I have a friend, and hopefully she won't see this, but we'll talk about it. She does see it. She has difficulty voicing her opinion in relationships about what she wants, and she projects that the other person can read her mind. And so her partner will say, is it all right if I go play basketball after she's expressed this desire to? I just think it'd be nice if we spent more time together. And he's like, but I'm like, yeah, but when he says you want to go play basketball, that's the kind of point to go say, hey, you know, I would like to do this. And then she doesn't. Then she gets super reactionary. Then she gets super vengeful because she feels he's done it on purpose. And he hasn't. You told him he could go play basketball. And so it kind of, she gets in this pattern. And so it's just learning from the past and learning from our foibles, right? Understanding why things aren't exactly as we like them. Never worry alone. Seek help when you need it. That's part of resilience. As I told you, I'm a turtle. I go inward. But if you're using your own resources and you're trying some of these things and things are still not making a lot of traction, you need to look for help. And that could be talking to your PCP. That could be talking to a therapist. It could be talking to a psychiatrist. It could be talking to your rabbi. It could be talking to your pastor. It could be anything. And I think the important thing to note is it's not the stress that kills us. It's our reaction to it. We will make it through if we can just control our reactions to it. I appreciate everybody staying around. I think I went over, but if you stayed around, you're really resilient. So thank you. Oh, just a few, okay. 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 What are some strategies for engaging stressed out students with all their extra anxiety that COVID regulations have presented? I like to talk to kids about what they're in control of, right? I like to start with that. Like I really like to get to the bottom of what's making you anxious. And I have a girl in my office that said the other day that she's anxious COVID's going to come to her school. And that's her anxiety. And so we talked about some of the things that are in her control to do, like being a good neighbor, keeping the distance, washing her hands, and that when she feels anxious, she's a younger girl, we do breathing. We do the 5-handed breathing where you inhale and exhale. Inhale. I like to teach kids stuff that they can bring with them, because if you don't bring your hand to school, you're in trouble anyway.
Protect the wire. It doesn't get cold and shaped. Stay nice and loose. You can actually go and crease there.
This is a really good one. I'm a pediatric nurse who was recently hired to be a school nurse. I currently work at a very socioeconomic, I work at a low socioeconomic elementary school. The children I serve are facing a large variety of issues: food insecurity, social parental life instability. I want to be identified as a safe place for the kids to help, including a mental health resource. But I often find myself not being able to get parents on board if I can get them at hold of them at all. I want to help with two things. What words can I use in the short term to comfort these children who are in distress, to get them to express themselves and feel safe? And what words can I use to reach parents or guardians to justice? I think the first part is kids know if you're bullshitting them or not, and they know if you're a safe space. And I like to have things, I like to have sensory things in my office that they can touch and squeeze. I like to have things, when you come into my office, you'll often smell like aromatherapy going. We have a lot of child-friendly things. Kids know when they walk into a space if the space was engineered for them. If they were thought about as, minding the child, right? There's that old school expression, mind the baby. If the child was present in designing the space. I think creating the physical environment is the first step to child safety, is kind of giving them things. I like to put things on the wall. I like feelings wheels. I like using emotional kind of thermometers. Where are you? Like little pictures. So kids don't, if they don't want to be verbal, they can point, and that sometimes starts the dialogue. And I'm using also these sensory objects to kind of calm them down. What words to reach parents, right? Because that's always hard. There are a couple things. I think it's in our world and what is going on, it's trying to get the parents to realize what's in it for you. When I talk to parents about sleep hygiene, I'm like, I tell them like, oh yeah, no. Well, it's hard. And I'm like, well, they wake up and they come in my bed. So I'm like, you want that to stop? Then we got to get on this. Everybody wants to know what's in it for them. And so if the kids are disrupted and leaving class and don't have access to their education, sometimes that raises a red flag for parents. I send notes home. I guess I'm wondering what some of the concerns are, and I don't know if this person wants to identify themselves and give me a little bit more, but when I can't reach parents and the kid's really in distress, I get really, really worried. And so I try to figure out, like, how's that kid getting home? Or is there an opportunity to intervene with the caregiver? Is there another ancillary support involved, whether it's social services or a case manager that can be your bridge? And sometimes it's hard to figure these things out, but sometimes we have to go to great lengths to get a hold of the parents. And that's hard, but the first step is trying to put a note in the backpack, maybe send a letter to the home, maybe trying to see who's picking them up and going that route. And then trying to get the parent to realize what's in it for them. Like, Susie's just not accessing her education, you know, and this is really bad, or Susie's really in distress and needs to go somewhere. I think that's where I would start. If kids are referred to you, what can you tell them to expect in your first appointment? So we split the appointments. Usually the first appointment is on Zoom, and I sit with the parents. I sit with the caregivers. I don't like appointments where they're all together. There's some things that are not.
Especially Phil's looking out on his kids.
What?
I mean,
I didn't hear her, sorry. The first appointment is with the parents, because I don't want some of the developmentally inappropriate language to be used. You know, like, oh, Johnny's just horrible. He pisses the bed and he's horrible. I don't want Johnny hearing that. I don't. I want to have a session with the parents to kind of gauge their partnership with me and kind of getting a sense of how they intervene with their child. Then the second appointment is usually parent and child. I see the kid by themselves. I see the kid and the parent together. And then we usually try to do some treatment planning. And the name of the app I use is called Water Aquarium. If you look at it on the marketplace, it's a little fish, and as you drink water, you add fish to your aquarium, and if you meet your goal, you get a fish, or you can change your scene or your background. Would you be willing to do a community-based workshop for kids to develop mindfulness and tools to treat stress and anxiety? So that's something that we're going to be working on. We're very excited. Working with the Alliance is new for me, and I'm very excited, and I have a wonderful team in the office, and I think that's something that I would like to move to because I think it's super important. I think that's it. All right, for those of you that stayed on, you're resilient.
I don't think we have any more questions, so I want to thank everybody for attending virtually. It's a different way of doing things, but we let those who were able to join. And thank you so much, Dr. Floyd. That was amazing.
Oh, well, thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Good night, everybody.